Unit 2, Lesson 2, Proportional versus Non-Proportional Tables, Part 2. In some tables, it's easy to find the unit rate. You can just do it in your head. So when you look at columns X and Y, you say, well, how do I get from 1 to 6? How do we get from 2 to 12, etc.? And you can see that you just multiply by 6 each time. All right, so you asked yourself, 1 times what is 6? 2 times what is 12? If you didn't know what to multiply by, you can divide because they're inverse operations. So remember that like 2 times 6 is 12, but 12 divided by 6 equals 2. Or the other fact would be 12 divided by 2 equals 6. So multiplication and division are inverse operations, are opposite operations. So I know that this one is easy and you can do it in your head. But if you couldn't, you could always use the y over x. So let's try that. Y in the first row is 6 over 1, which equals 6. 12 divided by 2 is 6. 18 divided by 3 is 6. And 24 divided by 4 is 6. So you could see here that there is a constant rate of 6. So this is a proportional relationship. So this was an easy one. So now let's try one where the numbers aren't as easy, right? So how do we get from 3 to 45? Well, if you cannot do that in your head, the easiest way to do it would be to use division. So we're going to use 45 divided by 3. It's always y over x, okay? I want you to think about that. It's always the y column over the x column. So lately I've been giving you the units, the hours, the dollars, and then the fact that you need the dollars over hours. There will be times, like later in this lesson, where I don't give you the units. You'll just see X and Y. Again, remember, you always put the Y value in the numerator. So let's see. We don't know what 3 times 45 is. 3 times what equals 45? We're going to divide to figure that out. So 45 divided by 3, 60 divided by 4, 90 divided by 6, 105 divided by 7. I want to point out that the most common mistake that people make is they would put 3 over 45, right? They would flip these or give the reciprocal. Again, y on top. So when we divide these, and again, you're welcome to use your calculator, you would get 15 each time. So the constant rate here is 15. So the table represents a proportional relationship because there is a constant rate of 15. Right. So far, it's pretty similar to what we've been doing. Now, what happens when the x values are greater than the y values? So let's look at what that means. In the other examples, we always had the x numbers are smaller than the y numbers, right? So you multiply. So let's look here. We want to know, how do we get from 20 to 10? Well, when you multiply a number, it gets bigger, right? So usually we're used to doing like 5 times 2 is 10, right? The number gets bigger when you multiply. Well, when you want to multiply and the number or the result gets smaller, that means you have to multiply by a number smaller than 1, all right? Smaller than 1. So you think 20 times what is going to give me 10? Well, if you know 20 times 1 is 20, that's too big. So the result of this problem is going to be a fraction or a decimal. So again, it may be a little tricky to do in your head. So what you need to do, remember, always do y over x. So we're going to put the 10 over 20, 15 over 30, 25 over 50, and 30 over 60, right? Now you can use your calculator and divide and get 10 divided by 20, Or you can simplify the fraction, right? Divide them both by 10 and you would get 1/2. So we get 1/2 or 0.5, right? The 0.5 comes from 10 divided by 20 and you would get 0.5. Same thing for each of these. So the table is a proportional relationship because there is a constant rate of 1/2, or you could say there's a constant rate of 0.5. All right. Sometimes the tables are horizontal instead of vertical. So in all of our other examples, right, the columns went down. Hours were up and down, dollars are up and down. Here we have the columns going side to side. So let's look. Our x value is 24 and our y value is 8. So sometimes the table does not have a third row, and I mentioned that in our first lesson. So if there's no third row, you can just create one. Right? And remember, our third row is our y over our x. So let's set up our fractions. Think about what the first fraction would be. Hint, would it be 24 over 8, or would it be 8 over 24? If you guessed 8 over 24, good, because the y value is on top. Then 9 over 27, 10 over 30, and 11 over 33. Now we just have to simplify them. So either we simplify the fractions, and we would get 1/3, or you can type it in a calculator and get 8 divided by 24, 9 divided by 27, and you'd actually get 0.3 repeating, but I just rounded. It would be 0.333333333. Okay, so this table represents a proportional relationship because there is a constant rate of 1/3, or we could say a constant rate of 0.3. All right, so overall, here's the tip. If the numbers in the x values are smaller than the y values, then the unit rate will be greater than 1. So let's see what that means. If the x numbers are smaller than the y numbers, then the unit rate, our third column, is going to be greater than 1. So let's see. How would I get from 2 to 4 or from 3 to 6? That's right, you would just multiply by 2, right? So our unit rate is 2, which would be greater than 1. All right, if the numbers in the x values are greater than y, the unit rate is going to be less than 1. Because if you're at 20 and you have to get to 2, right, you're going to be multiplying by a fraction or by a decimal, right? How do you get from 20 to 2? Well, you could do y over x, 2 over 20, and you would get 1/10 or 0.1, right? So again, the unit rate would be smaller than 1. Good. Okay, I'm going to pause it here and see if you can try this on your own. All right, so on this one, we had to do dollars per hour, right? Our y over our x. Let's set up all of our fractions. 2 over 10, 3, pardon my pen, 3 over 15, and 4 over 20. If you wanted to use a calculator, you do 1 divided by 5, you get 0.2. 2 divided by 10, 0.2. 3 divided by 5, 0.2. Or 4 divided by 20, 0.2. So you can see that this is a constant rate. So the table represents a proportional relationship because there's a constant rate of 0.2. Right, good. And I jumped to question 2. Let's go back to question 1. In the third column, type in y over x and divide. Here, you can just do it on a piece of paper, pause it, and try it. Okay, let's see what you got. So our numbers are getting bigger. So a lot of you probably thought to yourself, oh, I can just multiply by 5 each time. Right? So this one was a little bit easier to do in your head, but we can always do y over x to find our answer, or our unit rate for each row. And when we divide, you see you should get 5 each time, right? These results will always match. So the table represents a proportional relationship because there is a constant rate of 5, okay? So one last thing I want to point out, from x to y, the numbers get bigger, so our unit rate is greater than 1, right? It's 5. And in the second example, our numbers are getting smaller as we go from x to y, so our unit rate is less than 1, right? So if the numbers get smaller, our unit rate is going to be smaller than 1. Great.